Oh, I'm sorry I've neglected you guys on YouTube. My actual normal job has been pretty demanding this week. I will say, look, I'm falling hook, line, and sinker for this new damn logo. Will you look at that? Remember how skeptical were of this H? And like, look at how damn sweet this thing is. It's freaking nice. So I'm I'm way more impressed with trinkets than I thought I'd be. The Texans, as everybody is known for a long time, do not have a first round pick. Did not have a first round pick yesterday. There were reports from Diana Rossini that started off as speculation during the day, and then during the draft, it turned into actual reports of Nick Caserio calling around. And I've got an objection to the way it was framed or phrased because people kept saying, or Diana Rossini and others said that Nick was trying to get up into the first round. I prefer what Figgy Fig from Sports Radio 610 says, which is that he thinks that Nick was more looking for a sucker. That look, Nick's always going to be probing and trying to find out what's out there, what's available. The fact of the matter was the trade with the Vikings, for which the Texans got number 42. They got a 6th-round pick this year, and then they got another 2nd-round pick next year. That was initiated by Nick Caserio. They made the call to Minnesota when they did to move back into where they are right now. And for a team that really is set up to right now, given the draft capital, given the roster as it's constructed, the Texans were probably going to focus on defense in this draft. Still time to take an interior offensive lineman or something, but I think the actual forecast for what this draft was going to do ended up being accurate in a lot of ways. He had 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks, 14 offensive players go off the board initially. No matter how you feel about left guard and center, the Texans have 2 high draft picks in Juice Scruggs and Kenyon Green. They've got Patterson. Like, they've got guys I think that are going to compete for those spots. And I think Nick, my gut is that Nick feels good about those competitions, and they'll wait and see. So you enter tonight with needs at defensive tackle, cornerback slash safety. Let's just call it defensive back and linebacker. You can always add more linebackers, especially with D'Amico. They're set up very, very, very well for that. The one thought I had last night with the reports about Nick trying to trade up into the first round was that I was watching the broadcast on ABC with Nick Saban. So Nick Saban was talking about Terrion Arnold, the defensive back, the cornerback, and just gushing about him. And it's not like Nick has to try to put anybody over, put the University of Alabama over or anything. They've got a pretty good reputation. But he was talking about how Terrion Arnold honestly sounds a whole lot like Will Anderson and sounds a whole lot like D'Amico Ryans. And the quote when the Texans drafted Will Anderson was that D'Amico Ryans had just drafted himself. I'm listening to Nick Saban talk about how Miss Terry's favorite player is Terrion Arnold. Terrion Arnold sits right next to Nick Saban in the meetings. He's just got this incredible personality that everybody loves, but he also plays his ass off. And he was going in mock drafts on average about 17th overall. So it was a bit of a shocker that he fell down to 24. The Lions moved very aggressively to draft him. They gave up a 2nd rounder, I believe, to get up 5 or 6 spots. At that point, if the Texans were going to go up, could they have given up, could they have done that move for a 2nd, a 6th, and a future 2nd? I know they've already spent the future 2nd they got from Minnesota on Stephon Diggs, but whatever. It's all just currency at this point. Maybe that was in play, and I would have totally been cool with that. I don't think that would, but I'm glad that Nick didn't do it at all costs, because I do think, other than perhaps Terrion Arnold, the guys that they want right now, if you look at, let's just go with defensive tackles. I'm looking at, with Johnny Newton having fallen into the second round. Guy, I really like Johnny Newton. He had a Jones fracture during the season. Took a while to recover from that. These foot. Remember, we've had our share of foot injuries on the Texans. Like Kevin Johnson, where the foot injuries sometimes are kind of finicky. It's not as straightforward as it seems. So maybe that's scaring some teams off. But if you look at the Texans they have the 10th pick tonight at number 42 overall. If I go down the top 15 or 20 players on most power rankings out there, there are very few guys that I would be upset by if the Texans take them at 42. You look at the defensive tackles, Johnny Newton's there, Braden Fisk, Chris Jenkins, Mason Smith. I've got complex thoughts about Mason Smith. And I'll leave Tavondre Sweat. I've given up on Tavondre Sweat for the Texans for partly out of handicapping what they might do, and partly I'm realizing just how much of an awkward fit that might be. But Michael Hall Jr., Ruka Row, your boat. Uh, Go down to Dwayne Carter. There's a bunch of those guys to the point where I kind of put all those guys in the same category, other than Gabe Hall and Mason Smith, who are just bigger body, less athletic guys. The rest of those defensive tackles are very athletic, but a little bit undersized, but they all play their asses off. I'm going to feel really good about, like, I guarantee you right now, if the Texans take a defensive tackle at number 59, I'm going to be happy with the guy. I'll be really surprised if I'm not happy with that guy. So if you go to cornerbacks, I mean, the way that cornerbacks either slid, or maybe some of the guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry's available. Cooper DeJean is still out there, who might kill two birds with one stone with his versatility. Not to mention, with Cooper DeJean, if teams like him as a defensive back, a lot of teams are trying to figure out whether kick returner is actually a thing again. And Cooper DeJean can be a returner. So, those are just the first two guys: Ennis Rakestraw, Kamari Lassiter, TJ Tampa. If you go down, if you want a nickel cornerback, Mike Sanders still is like might be the perfect guy for that. Like, you can just go on and on. I can give you 20 names. Like linebacker Edgerrin Cooper. Like, Edgerrin Cooper is the first guy. After that, I think there's a few other guys that maybe are third rounders at best. But I feel really good about where they are right now. As far as why do we need Edgerrin Cooper when Christian Harrison, you pronounced it wrong, and now I'm not going to get it. Elshire are amazing. I feel good about those two. You do need three linebackers. The Sam linebacker is kind of marginalized these days. That's what Elshire was in San Francisco with D'Amico. He was a Sam linebacker that, because of Dre Greenlaw's injury, came and played on the inside. So, like, it's always good to have more linebackers, especially when you've got a coach who said multiple times that he wants to build really with the defensive. He talks about the defensive front, but I think the front seven in general, I think there's a chance that with one of those two spots, they might take a linebacker if they really like Edgerrin Cooper. And I'll defer to D'Amico on that, just because it's not even as much with linebackers, especially. There's the measurables, but then there's the intangibles of play recognition, football IQ, just good old fashioned linebacker instinct and all of that stuff. And I know Edgerrin Cooper is wired the way that D'Amico wants his play. Like, Edgerrin Cooper is wired a lot like Elshire, I think. I think he's got a lust for contact and physicality. I'm trying not to say violence as much anymore, because, there's all kinds of hang-ups with that. But I like violence. I think I like football violence is a good violence. It's like playing a video game. I mean, it hurts us more when we get injured and everything than video games. But it's going to be a big night. I don't know if Nick. I feel like Nick might stand pat with some of these, other than some maneuvering up and down. So I'm not overly concerned about him trading back a bunch or anything. I'm going over to the draft party at Discovery Green 15 minutes ago. So if I sound a little hurried or a little rushed or a little frazzled, that's where I am right now. Take a couple questions before we go. Let's see. Knew how many offensive players would be taken. Yeah, I think that's 100%. The legend, the man, Seth Payne, trading up twice tonight. I like your chutzpah, Lalo. The Texans are getting absolutely everything right at the moment. The coach hire, the 2023 draft choices, the 2024 free agency class, the new uniforms and the logos. What a time to be a fan. It is. It's different, man. It's just so much different. I was just in the producer's booth talking to Tyler Milner, and he was telling me about how Greg Grissom, the team president, was on. Greg Grissom was on when I was in the producer's booth. I was like, oh, had they scheduled that? No. He was walking by, and Show just grabbed him and pulled him on. Like, it's more professional than it's been in a long time, and yet at the same time, it's way more casual. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the fact that D'Amico's ability to excise, or just to cut out the BS and not worry about the stuff that doesn't matter, kind of flows over into everything else. And I know a lot of you probably watched CJ last night. I think CJ's got a hell of a future as a commentator if he wants it when he's done, if he wants to go down that road, because he doesn't, he's rehearsed or well studied. He's studied, he's prepared. He was sitting there with notepads. Where a lot of current athletes, when they show up to these draft shows, they're not taking it nearly as seriously as a lot of other, like you guys. If you guys were on a draft show, you're going to be ultra prepared. CJ was ultra prepared. Couple more questions. Let's see. Nearly perfect first round. I know. Okay. All right. So seriously, can we appreciate this for a moment? Nearly perfect first round for Houston. Texans didn't draft, remember? And yet this is like the 90% consensus, not just amongst Texans fans, but by people at large. It's the craziest thing. And it's so much fun today. I've never enjoyed like scrolling through Twitter as much on all this general draft coverage as I have before, because usually I'm fixated on what the Texans did. It's a different feel or vibe than when the Texans didn't have first round picks before, because you just got such a feeling of positive momentum. It's all really good. It's all very, very good stuff. I don't know what to do with all this positivity. And I'm going to the Texans draft watch party tonight. I'm going to be broadcasting with Vandermeer and John Harris and Robert Hensley, I believe. So yeah, come say hi when I'm out there. You know how these draft broadcasts go. Mostly it's Mark and myself deferring to John Harris and me asking John Harris things that I'm interested about. So much more so than like when we do the pregame or something, just come up and just grab me. I'll be good. They'll be fine without me. They don't need me. They just basically, they have me there as a favor to myself, I think, to keep me from getting in trouble. NFL violence is the best kind of violence. It really, really is. It really is. So thank you. And my message for tonight is, honestly, I'm not trying to straddle a fence here or anything. I like a lot of these defensive tackles. I really, really do. I think that Johnny Newton, in some ways, don't take this wrong, Longhorns, at all. There's some things about Johnny Newton's game that I actually like more than Byron Murphy. I think Byron Murphy athletically and as a playmaker has a lot of upside, and that's why he went where he did. But the one thing that stands out with Johnny Newton compared to Byron Murphy, for two guys that aren't big guys, Johnny Newton, I don't want to make this comparison. It's a partial comparison. He's a little like watching Aaron Donald when Aaron Donald was in college. You look at Aaron Donald and he's like this 6'1", 280 pound guy, but he was as strong as a nose tackle. Like if he wanted to, he could have gained 30 or 40 pounds and been a nose tackle, Jerry Ball style, like a shorter nose tackle in the NFL. Like Johnny Newton has that sturdiness to him that is really impressive to me. Even when he gets knocked out of position, he's never off his feet. Byron Murphy gets knocked to the ground sometimes as a smaller guy. So I think there's reasons to get excited about all these guys. I could go down the list and talk about the positives and the negatives, but they've got a boatload of guys who play their ass off. Like they've got motors. I don't know what's gotten into these kids, but like back in my day, there were a lot of defensive tackles in the second and third round that were just kind of lazy bums, for lack of a better term. I don't know if that's an official scouting term. These guys all hustle their ass off. Even Devondre Sweat he's physiologically challenged because he's so big, but before his engine runs down, he does hustle his ass off. He's got some physiological disadvantages. I got to get going or I'm going to be late to this broadcast. If you're going to the party tonight, come say hello. And I promise you, I am going to be spending Saturday and Sunday afternoon doing a whole lot of write-ups of the Texans draft picks or breakdowns of the Texans draft pick. Awesome. Everybody have an awesome time tonight.